I will give your mother back her life and health, the old woman said, her voice almost musical now as she stated the pact. In exchange, I ask for a life in return. A life for a life. Omasi felt a stab of fear. Was the woman asking for her to bring another person's life or an animal sacrifice? What exactly did she mean? I don't understand, she said carefully. What life do you want? My own life? The old woman paused behind Omasi and leaned close to whisper near her ear, making Omasi shiver. Not your death, child. Your life. Your soul. Akudo sat by the dying fire inside her hut, staring at the faint glow of embers. The night air was warm and heavy, but she felt a chill deep inside her bones. Across the hearth, her daughter Omasi sat on a low wooden stool. Omasi's eyes were open, fixed on the orange flicker of the coals. But there was a strange emptiness in her gaze, as if she was looking through the flames at something far away. Akudo's heart tightened. This was the same day again, the day the earth itself seemed to hold its breath each year. Every year, on this very night, something was terribly wrong with her daughter. Earlier that evening, as the sun was setting and the shadows grew long, Omasi had turned to her mother with confusion clouding her once bright eyes and asked the question that shattered Akudo's soul. "Who are you?" Omasi had said, her voice hollow. At first, Akudo thought she had misheard. She had been grinding millet in a clay bowl while Omasi sorted some firewood. They were speaking softly about going to the market the next day. Then Omasi had fallen silent mid-sentence. When Akudo gently touched her daughter's arm, the girl pulled back slightly and looked at her as one might look at a stranger. "Who are you?" Omasi repeated in a timid whisper, genuinely lost. Akudo's throat went dry. "My daughter, it's me. It's your mother," she replied, voice trembling. She reached out and touched Omasi's shoulder. The girl did not move. For a heartbeat, Omasi's face remained blank. Then confusion gave way to a flicker of fear or frustration. She pressed her palms to her temples, closing her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't know what... I feel strange." Akudo gathered her daughter into her arms. Omasi was now shaking, as if cold, though the night was warm. "It's all right," Akudo whispered, rocking her gently. But it was not all right. It was far from all right. Omasi had forgotten her own mother. Now, hours later, the two sat in silence by the fire. Akudo kept glancing at her daughter. Omasi had hardly spoken since that moment. She seemed to be fighting to remember, but every so often, Akudo saw her daughter's eyes glaze over again, as though part of her was slipping away. It was like watching a lamp flicker, threatening to go out. Akudo tossed a small stick into the fire, trying to stir it back to life. Sparks danced up, briefly illuminating the single-room hut. In the faint light, she saw the familiar interior, the mat she slept on in one corner, the wooden mortar and pestle, clay pots lined on a shelf, the folded wrapper cloth she wore during the day. These were ordinary things, comforting things. Yet, tonight, they felt like the belongings of someone who was about to lose everything. For years, Akudo had felt a growing fear in her heart, one she had tried to deny. She remembered the first time she had noticed something was wrong, years ago. It had been on this same date, a date she now counts with dread. But she pushed those memories aside for now. Tonight, the truth could no longer be ignored. A log shifted in the fire, breaking into a shower of red sparks. Akudo flinched at the sudden movement of light. Akudo watched as her daughter blinked, looking momentarily startled. "Omasi," Akudo said softly, "how do you feel?" Omasi turned towards her, opening her mouth as if to answer, but then paused. She looked down at her hands. "I feel..." she began slowly. Empty. Empty? Akudo echoed. Pained her. Omasiri nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek, glistening in the firelight. Something is missing, Ma. I don't know what it is. I just feel hollow inside. And my head, my thoughts are cloudy. It's like I am trying to remember a dream that fades away when I wake up. Akudo reached out and wiped the tear from her daughter's face. Do you remember asking me who I was a short while ago? She asked carefully. Omasiri frowned, a crease forming between her brows. She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. I remember I was talking to you about the market. Then I felt a headache. Everything after that is blurry. Her voice trembled. Did I say something wrong? I feel like I did, but I can't recall. Akudo forced a reassuring smile onto her face, though her heart was pounding. You were just tired, my dear. It has been a long day, she lied gently. She did not want to alarm Omasiri further. Perhaps you should rest. Omasiri looked at the mat on the floor and then back at her mother. She suddenly grasped Akudo's hand, her grip urgent and scared like a child. Mother, she whispered, I'm scared. Something is happening to me. I feel like I'm disappearing. Her eyes pleaded for an explanation, for comfort. Akudo felt hot tears gathering in her own eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She needed to be strong now. She squeezed Omasiri's hand. You will be okay, Omasiri. I am here with you, she said softly. But what if one day I forget you again? What if I forget myself? Omasiri's voice cracked on the words. Akudo could not lie this time. She gently pulled Omasiri into an embrace. The girl's head rested on her shoulder as Akudo stroked her hair, just as she did when Omasiri was a small child, frightened by thunder at night. Listen to me, Akudo murmured. No matter what happens, I will do everything a mother can do to protect you. I will not let you disappear, my child. Omasiri closed her eyes and nodded against her mother's shoulder, too drained to speak further. In a little while, Akudo felt Omasiri's breathing slow into the rhythm of sleep. The poor girl had exhausted herself with worry and confusion. Carefully, Akudo guided her daughter to lie down on the mat. She covered Omasiri with a thin cloth. Omasiri's face was peaceful in sleep, the lines of worry smoothed out. In sleep, she looked like the lively, happy girl Akudo remembered from years before, the girl she used to be, before whatever curse or bargain had stolen pieces of her away. Akudo's hands trembled as she adjusted the cloth over Omasiri. She could barely admit the truth to herself, but she knew at last exactly what was happening to her daughter. The final piece of doubt had been removed tonight. Omasiri's blank eyes, her question, "Who are you?" It confirmed everything. Akudo rose quietly and sat back down by the fire, her mind racing. She thought of the strange dreams that had been haunting her own nights. Dreams of a narrow path in the forest and an old woman with eyes like burning coals. Dreams that whispered the same phrase over and over, life is not taken for nothing. The first time Akudo had that dream, she woke up gasping for air. She remembered clutching her chest, a cold sweat on her skin. It made no sense then. She tried to dismiss it as a nightmare, but the dream returned again and again, especially as each planting season approached. And then there were the things the village medicine man had told her when she finally gathered the courage to seek answers. Akudo felt a lump in her throat as she recalled his grave words days ago. He had thrown his cowrie shells on the mat, studied them with narrowed eyes, and then looked up at her, sorrow heavy in his gaze. Your breath continues because another spirit is being eaten slowly, he had said quietly. Akudo stared at him in confusion and dread. He explained what he sensed. On the night she nearly died years ago, a powerful exchange had been made, a soul given in place of her life. The medicine man spoke in riddles of dark dealings and forest spirits, but Akudo understood enough. She knew who had made that sacrifice, her own daughter. At first, Akudo refused to believe it. Omasiri would never do such a dangerous thing, she thought. But as the years passed, Akudo witnessed her daughter's vibrant spirit dim bit by bit, year after year, always on that same fateful day. Now, seeing Omasiri not even recognize her, Akudo could no longer pretend it was coincidence or some ordinary illness. The medicine man's words were true. A soul was indeed being eaten away. Omasiri's soul, given in exchange for Akudo's life. Akudo covered her face with her hands, silently weeping by the faint fire. Guilt and love and despair all battled within her. Her sweet daughter had done this for her, out of pure love and desperate fear of losing her, and Akudo had been living on borrowed time, ignorant while Omasiri suffered in silence. I should have known, she whispered to herself. The signs were there, the miraculous recovery she experienced when the healer had already pronounced her as good as dead. How could she have survived when others with the same sickness did not? It was not medicine or chance, it was Omasiri's doing. Akudo wiped her tears. Crying would not help her daughter now. She gazed at Omasiri's sleeping form. Omasiri had saved her life. Now it was Akudo's turn to save Omasiri's life, or whatever was left of it. Her dream replayed in her mind. The old woman on the forest path. Akudo realized that it had not just been a dream. It was a calling, a message. The same path her daughter had walked years before, into the forest to give her soul away. Akudo's jaw set in determination. If there was a path to losing a soul, perhaps there was a path to getting it back. The old one or whatever creature wore that form made the bargain with Omasiri. Akudo would find her and she would make the old one take her life instead, returning Omasiri's soul. Life is not taken for nothing. The words echoed once more in Akudo's mind. She rose to her feet, quietly but swiftly. Omasiri slept on. Unaware, Akudo wrapped an old shawl tightly around her thin shoulders and took up her walking stick. Her knees felt weak, but she willed strength into them. She had been ill once, but for the past few years she had been healthy. Now she needed that strength more than ever. With a final tender glance at her sleeping daughter, Akudo stepped outside. The night greeted her with the chorus of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. The full moon hung overhead, bathing the compound in silver light. The village of Unubi was silent. Everyone else was asleep in their huts. Only the spirits of the night were awake. Akudo walked past the dying embers of the outdoor fire pit and through the clearing that led towards the thick forest beyond the village. Each step felt heavy with purpose and dread. She was afraid. Who wouldn't be, walking into the darkness to face a powerful unknown? But her love for Omasiri was far greater than her fear. At the edge of the village, where the last hut stood and the tall grasses of the wilderness began, Akudo paused. She remembered telling Omasiri earlier that night, "I will not let you disappear." Those were not empty words. Clutching her stick, Akudo took a deep breath and whispered a prayer to any benevolent spirit or God listening. "Protect my child until I return. Guide my feet." Then, without another moment's hesitation, she stepped onto the narrow path leading into the forest, the same path from her dreams. The moonlight faded under the canopy of ancient trees as Akudo vanished into the embrace of the dark forest, determined to face the being that had claimed her daughter's soul. 3 years earlier, the village of Unubi was filled with the sounds of life. Roosters crowed at dawn, children laughed as they fetched water from the stream, and farmers sang call and response songs in the fields. In a small compound on the outskirts of the village lived Akudo and her daughter Omasiri. Back then, Omasiri was a lively girl of about 16 years, known for her bright smile and kind heart. She and her mother did everything together and shared an unbreakable bond. Akudo was a widow. Her husband had died many years ago from a sudden fever, leaving her to raise Omasiri alone. They were poor, but they found joy in the simple things. Omasiri would help her mother tend a tiny garden behind their hut, where they grew a few yams and vegetables. Each morning, she swept the compound clean with a broom made of palm fronds, while Akudo pounded cassava or prepared a thin porridge for their breakfast. Despite their hardships, laughter often filled their home. In the evenings, after the day's work was done doing, mother and daughter would sit outside under the moonlight. Akudo would tell Omasiri old folk tales about the clever tortoise or the spirits that lived in the great Iroko trees. Omasiri loved these stories and would listen with eyes wide in wonder, occasionally asking questions or making funny comments that sent them both into fits of giggles. They did not have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. One planting season, however, everything began to change. It started when Akudo caught a persistent cough at the end of the rainy season. At first, she dismissed it as a common cold. She continued working in the fields and doing her daily chores. Omasiri boiled herbs for her to drink, and Akudo assured her it would pass. But the cough did not pass. It grew worse with each moon. By the time the yams were ready to harvest, Akudo was struggling with constant fatigue and fever. She sometimes had to sit down and catch her breath after even light tasks. Omasiri became increasingly worried. She would often insist her mother rest while she took on more of the chores. Akudo, proud and used to being strong, tried to push through her illness, but it was clear she was weakening. One hot afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, Omasiri returned from the stream with a pot of water on her head to find Akudo lying on the ground outside their hut. Panicked, Omasiri dropped the pot, spilling the hard-gathered water, and rushed to her mother's side. Akudo was conscious, but breathing hard, her skin burning with fever. "Ma, what is it?" Omasiri cried, slipping an arm under her mother's shoulders to help her sit up. Akudo tried to smile to reassure her. "I'm fine, my daughter," she rasped unconvincingly. "Just a little tired." But Omasiri's eyes filled with tears. Her mother's once strong frame felt too light and frail in her arms. "This is not just tiredness. We need to get you help," she said firmly. They both knew what needed to be done. The next morning, Omasiri went to fetch the village medicine man. He was a respected elder named Uzo, known for his knowledge of herbs and the spirits. Everyone simply called him Healer Uzo. Healer Uzo came to their hut, carrying a small bag of herbs and cowrie shells. He found Akudo lying on a mat, coughing weakly. Omasiri knelt by her side, holding her hand anxiously. The healer examined Akudo carefully. He felt her forehead, listened to her breathing, and checked her eyes and tongue. He burned some medicinal leaves in a clay pot and let the smoke waft around Akudo, muttering a quiet prayer to the gods for healing. Omasiri watched with hopeful eyes, clinging to every action. She had seen Healer Uzo work miracles before, curing a child of a deadly fever, helping a woman in a difficult childbirth. Surely he could help her mother too. After some time, Healer Uzo sat back with a troubled frown. He motioned Omasiri to step outside with him so Akudo wouldn't hear his words and worry. Omasiri's heart pounded as she followed him just beyond the hut's door. The old healer sighed and looked at the ground before meeting Omasiri's eyes. "Your mother's sickness is very advanced," he said softly. "I have given her herbs to ease her cough and reduce the fever, but," he trailed off. "But she will get better, right?" Omasiri asked desperately, searching the healer's face for any sign of hope. The healer pressed his lips together for a moment and said, "My child, I will not lie to you. The illness has taken a strong hold on her. I fear that if the gods do not intervene, she may not live to see the next planting season." Omasiri's heart blurred with tears as she realized the healer was preparing her for the worst. She wanted to scream that it wasn't fair. Akudo was all she had. How could she go on without her mother? She managed to thank Healer Uzo and he left with a promise to pray for Akudo. Omasiri wiped her tears, straightened her back, and went inside to tend to her mother. She decided she would not let her mother see her despair. If Akudo lost hope, the fight would be over. Over the next few weeks, Omasiri threw herself into caring for Akudo. Every morning, before the first cock crow, she guided her weak mother to the nearby stream as the healer suggested. The dawn air was cool and filled with mist as Omasiri helped Akudo bathe in the gentle flowing water, both of them shivering slightly. Omasiri would close her eyes and pray silently with every fiber of her being to the earth goddess and to any spirit that might listen, asking them to heal her mother. By day, Omasiri gathered herbs that Healer Uzo recommended, boiled them into bitter teas, and carefully fed them to Akudo. She cooked whatever nourishing food she could afford or find, thin yam porridge, mashed plantains, coaxing her mother to eat. Akudo tried to smile and eat to please her daughter, but her appetite was gone, and chewing even a few mouthfuls exhausted her. As the days passed, Akudo grew weaker. Her cough sometimes racked her body so violently at night that Omasiri would hold her, tears in her own eyes, whispering soothing words. Sleep became difficult for both of them. Akudo drifted in and out of fevers and chills. There were moments she seemed to get better, when she would speak softly to Omasiri and stroke her daughter's back, telling her everything would be all right. But those moments were followed by longer spells of silence and distant gazes, as if Akudo were already halfway between this world and the next. The village women came by often to check on Akudo and to help Omasiri with chores. One neighbor, Ineka, helped wash their clothes and sweep the compound. Another brought food from time to time. They all loved Akudo and felt sorry for Omasiri, a young girl carrying such a heavy burden. In hushed whispers outside the hut, some of the women discussed how unfair it was. The poor child, they said. First her father, now she may lose her mother too. One evening, Omasiri overheard two of the older women speaking in low tones by the cooking fire. "Have you noticed the strange mark on Akudo's shoulder? It looks like a bad sign," one said. The other hushed her, but Omasiri demanded gently, "What did you see on my mother's shoulder?" The women exchanged glances. Finally, the braver one, an aunt named Ngozi, cleared her throat. "It's probably nothing, dear, just a small birthmark or rash," she said. But Omasiri insisted. "Please tell me." Ngozi sighed. "I saw a mark that looked like a dark handprint on her skin when I changed her clothes. It might just be from lying down too long, but sometimes people say such marks mean a spirit has touched someone." "Don't fill the girl's head with fear," the other woman scolded softly. Omasiri's heart pounded. A spirit's touch? Could it be that a malevolent spirit was behind her mother's illness? The thought terrified her, but also lit a tiny flame of resolve. If a spirit was doing this, perhaps a spirit could also undo it. That night, as Akudo slept fitfully, Omasiri remained awake. She sat outside under the moon, her back against the mud wall of the hut. Hugging her moons, she gazed at the sky sprinkled with stars. Normally, those stars comforted her, made her feel that the ancestors were watching over them. But now, she felt only loneliness. She could lose her mother at any moment, and she felt utterly powerless. "Please, someone, help us," Omasiri whispered to the night, tears slipping down her cheeks. The only response was the distant croaking of frogs and the whisper of a breeze through the trees. In the days that followed, Akudo's condition worsened significantly. She could barely stand and spent most of the day lying on the mat. Her breathing was shallow and her skin was hot to the touch. One afternoon, Hilauzo visited again at Omasiri's pleading. He brought a calabash of special tonic made from rare roots. Omasiri carefully helped her mother drink it, but Akudo coughed most of it up. The healer shook his head grimly when Omasiri looked at him for signs of hope.
Finally came the night that Omasiri would never forget. Akudo's condition had reached a critical point. She was hardly conscious, mumbling in delirium. Omasiri had lit an oil lamp and sat by her mother's bedside, wiping Akudo's sweaty face with a damp cloth. Every now and then, Akudo would mutter fragments of words, sometimes names of relatives long gone, sometimes prayers, sometimes nonsense. Omasiri, Akudo called weakly, her eyes half open but not truly seeing. "I'm here, Ma," Omasiri said, holding her mother's hand tightly. Her mother's hand felt so light and fragile like a small bird. Akudo's cracked lips moved. "My daughter, do not be afraid," she whispered between breaths. If I must go, you will not be alone. The ancestors will watch over you." Her voice was hoarse and faint. A sob caught in Omasiri's throat. "Don't say that, mother. You will be fine," she insisted, blinking back tears. Akudo gave a weak, sad smile. "Whatever happens, be strong. Promise me." Omasiri couldn't hold back her tears anymore. They streamed down her face. "I promise," she lied, because she could not imagine how she could be strong without her mother. In her heart, she was breaking. As midnight neared, Akudo fell into a deep unconsciousness. Her breathing was ragged. Omasiri feared with every breath that it might be her mother's last. She pressed her ear to Akudo's chest, listening to the faint heartbeat, clinging to hope. Outside, the village was quiet. The full moon cast pale light through the open doorway of the hut. Omasiri felt utterly alone with her dying mother. Desperate and exhausted, she found herself speaking softly to whatever spirits might hear, just as someone would speak to a person in the room. "Take me instead," she begged the darkness, voice trembling. "If someone must die, take me. Let my mother live. Please, I will give anything." She had no idea if anyone or anything heard her plea, but in the silence that followed, as the last words left her lips, Omasiri felt something strange. A faint chill breeze entered the hut, though it was a still night. The flame of the oil lamp flickered as if a wind had passed through, nearly going out. Omasiri shivered, a sudden goosebumps rising on her skin. Then, from outside the hut, she heard what sounded like a whisper. It was impossible to say if it was the wind in the trees or an actual voice, but to Omasiri it felt like a response. She lifted her head, holding her breath. "Hello?" she whispered into the darkness. From outside, the whisper came again. This time, it was clearer, forming a single word that sent a jolt through Omasiri's spine. "Omasiri." Someone or something was calling her name from just beyond the clearing of her home. The voice was rasping and low, like dry leaves over rocks. It did not sound familiar, but it spoke her name clearly. Omasiri's heart thumped. She looked at her mother. Akudo was still unconscious, unaware of anything. Again, the voice called, a little louder, coming from the direction of the forest. "Omasiri, come!" It was an old woman's voice, quavering yet strong in a strange way. Omasiri felt an icy dread, but also a curious pull. Could this be a spirit answering her desperate prayer? Perhaps a forest deity or ancestor come to guide her. Gently, Omasiri set her mother's hand down. She stood up, legs shaking. She grabbed the oil lamp and stepped outside, squinting into the night. The moonlight was bright enough to see the outline of the trees at the edge of the compound. Beyond that lay the dense forest that villagers rarely enter after dark, a place of wild animals and wandering spirits. Just at the edge where the light met darkness, Omasiri thought she saw a figure. It looked like a bent old woman draped in what might be a cloak or long cloth. The figure's shadowy and indistinct, but the outline was unmistakable. She was standing just under a coconut tree, beckoning. Omasiri's mouth went dry. Every instinct told her a young girl should not walk into the night towards a strange figure. In normal times, she would never do such a thing. But these were not normal times. Akudo was dying, and she had begged for any spirit to take her in exchange. Perhaps this was the answer. Gathering every ounce of courage, Omasiri whispered a prayer for protection and stepped forward. Her bare feet left the familiar warmth of the doorstep and touched the cool earth outside. The old woman's voice carried on the breeze once more, urging her, "Come, child." Omasiri glanced back into the hut one last time. She could see her mother's still form on the mat from here. "I'm doing this for you, Ma," she whispered to herself. With determination and fear battling in her chest, Omasiri lifted the oil lamp and walked towards the forest, following the strange call into the darkness. Omasiri's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped beneath the canopy of the forest. The night instantly grew darker. Only slender beams of moonlight filtered through the leaves above. The trees here were ancient and towering, their trunks twisted with age. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. Omasiri held up her oil lamp, its weak flame casting quivering shadows that danced around her like spirits. Somewhere ahead, deeper among the trees, she could just make out the figure of the old woman. The stranger moved surprisingly quickly for someone who appeared so aged, always staying a few steps beyond the lamp's glow. Every time Omasiri thought she might catch up, the old woman seemed to glide further back, leading her onward. The forest was eerily silent, as if even the insects and night birds were holding their breath. Omasiri's fear grew with each step, but she forced herself to continue. For Mother, she reminded herself with every shaky breath. "I'm doing this for Mother." At last, the old woman came to a stop in a small clearing. Omasiri emerged from between two tall iroko trees and saw the woman standing in the center of the clearing, bathed in a shaft of moonlight. In the pale light, the woman's appearance made Omasiri's blood run cold. The stranger was indeed an old woman, but something about her was unnatural. She was stooped and short, her back bent as though she carried a great burden of years. A ragged dark cloth hung off her thin frame. Her skin was wrinkled and as dry-looking as aged bark. But most unsettling were her eyes. They gleamed in the darkness, catching the lamplight. They were not the cloudy eyes of a frail grandmother. Instead, they shone alert and sharp, a strange yellow hue, almost like the eyes of a night creature. The old woman's face cracked into a grin when Omasiri stepped into the clearing. Her teeth were surprisingly white and even, a stark contrast to her ancient face. "You came," she said in a voice that was low and raspy, yet somehow filled the clearing clearly. Omasiri swallowed hard. Her mouth was so dry she could barely speak. Yes, she managed to stammer. She held the lamp up, trying to get a better look at this mysterious person. Up close now, she noticed the old woman's feet were bare and covered in mud. Around her neck hung a necklace made of some kind of animal teeth and brightly colored beads that glinted in the moonlight. The old woman's grin softened into something like a kindly smile, but her eyes remained intense. "Why have you come, child?" she asked, though surely she knew the answer. After all, she had called Omasiri out here. "My mother," Omasiri began, her voice trembling. She took a step closer, gripping the lamp with both hands. "My mother is very sick. She is dying. I need to save her." The old woman tilted her head, as if considering this. "And do you think I can help you?" Her tone was curious, almost amused. Omasiri's hands shook, causing the lamplight to jitter. She nodded quickly. "I don't know who you are, but you called me here. I begged for help and you answered. If you have any power to save my mother, please help her. I will give anything." At this, the old man's smile returned, wider than before. "Anything you say." She took a slow step towards Omasiri. Her movements were oddly fluid, as though her feet barely touched the ground. "Mind your words, little one. Anything is a big promise." Omasiri felt a chill but kept her chin up. "I mean it," she said, voice stronger now despite her fear. "My mother is all I have. If she dies, I have nothing. I cannot let that happen. So yes, anything. I will pay any price, do any task, whatever it takes." The old woman stopped a pace away from Omasiri. She was slightly bent over, yet with her proximity, her presence felt looming. She raised a gnarled hand and gently lifted a strand of Omasiri's hair that had fallen over her face. Omasiri flinched at the touch. It was cold and sent a jolt through her. The woman examined the hair between her fingertips in the lamplight, then let it fall. "You have your mother's face," the old woman said casually, as if making small talk. "The same eyes, the same nose. You love her very much, don't you?" "With all my heart. Please, can you save her? Who are you? Are you a spirit, an ancestor?" The old woman chuckled softly, a dry sound like leaves rustling. "I have been called many things. Some might call me a spirit of the forest. Some might call me a witch." Her eyes glinted. "But those names do not matter. What matters is I have the power you need, and perhaps you have something I want as well." As she spoke, Omasiri noticed that at the old woman's feet, the grass and plants seemed to be bending toward her, as if a breeze were drawing everything in her direction. Yet Omasiri felt no wind on her skin. The night was still. Omasiri took a shaky breath. "If you can truly heal my mother, then tell me what you want. I will give you anything I have, but I'm afraid I don't own much. We are poor. If you want money or jewels, I have none. If you want labor, I will work for you." She trailed off, not sure what a person like this could desire. The old man reached out and gently patted Omasiri's cheek. Her touch, though cold, was oddly comforting this time, like a grandmotherly pat. "Shh, child. I do not need your money. I do not need simple labor." Her eyes bored into Omasiri. "What I want is far more precious. But first, let me be clear. I can save Akudo." Omasiri felt a surge of hope at hearing her mother's name. This being knew Akudo's name, perhaps she had truly heard Omasiri's prayers. You can really make her better? Please, I beg you, if you can do it now. She might not survive until morning." "I can," the old woman said, nodding slowly. "Your mother's illness is beyond any ordinary cure, as you have learnt, but for me it is a simple thing to take away. I can give her back health and strength. By dawn, she will rise as if she never was sick at all." Tears of relief welled in Omasiri's eyes. It sounded too good to be true. Yet, here she was, in a moonlit clearing, speaking to a woman who was surely a spirit. Who else could promise such things? Omasiri bowed her head gratefully. Thank you, she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "I will never be able to repay you, but I will try." The old man held up a hand to stop Omasiri's flood of gratitude. "Ah, but not so fast," she said, her voice turning slightly firmer. "I said I can do this, and I will. But you must repay me, child. There is always a price for such favors." Omasiri looked up, wiping her tears with the back of one hand. Yes, I understand. Please, what do you want from me? Whatever it is, I agree." The old woman's lips curled into a grin again. "You should hear the terms before you agree so eagerly," she said with a light laugh. "But your devotion is admirable." She began to pace slowly around Omasiri, circling her like a slow-moving shadow. Omasiri turned her head to keep the old one in sight, heart thudding. Her entire body was tense. "I will give your mother back her life and health," the old woman said, her voice almost musical now as she stated the pact. "In exchange, I ask for a life in return. A life for a life. That is fair, is it not?" A life for a life. Omasiri felt a stab of fear. Was the woman asking for her to bring another person's life or an animal sacrifice? What exactly did she mean? I don't understand," she said carefully. "What life do you want? My own life?" If it was her own life, Omasiri was ready. She had already thought in her desperation she would give her life for her mother. If she had to die for Akudo to live, so be it. The old woman paused behind Omasiri and leaned close to whisper near her ear, making Omasiri shiver. "Not your death, child. Your life. Your soul." Omasiri turned to face her, confused by the distinction. "My soul? You mean you want my spirit? I don't know how that works, but if I give you my soul, what will happen to me?" The old woman stepped back in front of Omasiri, her face expressionless now. If you give me your soul, it will belong to me entirely. It is the essence of who you are. I will take it as payment. Omasiri felt a cold dread creeping into her stomach. The way the old woman spoke was a matter of fact, as if discussing a simple trade. Will it kill me? Omasiri asked in a small voice. The old woman's head tilted again, and a slow smile stretched her lips. In time, she said. Not immediately, dear. I am not so cruel as to kill you on the spot. Besides, what use is a life if it is snuffed out in an instant? No, I shall take your soul piece by piece, slowly over the years. You will still live for a while, enough to see your mother healthy and happy, perhaps even long enough to watch her grow old. But every year, on this night, a part of you will be mine. Little by little, you will lose the parts of yourself that make you who you are. Omasiri's legs felt weak as the old woman described this fate. It sounded terrifying, losing herself slowly, but she thought of her mother's kind smile, her warm hands braiding Omasiri's hair, her voice singing softly at night. She thought of life without that. How could she wake up each day knowing her mother was gone because she, Omasiri, hadn't been brave enough to save her? Omasiri bit her lip. You said I might live to see her grow old, so I wouldn't even mind if I lose myself as long as she's alive and well. If I forget who I am, or even who she is one day, it's worth it. Even as she said those words, her chest ached. The thought of one day not recognizing her own mother was heartbreaking, but at least her mother would be alive and not in pain, not suffering. The old woman watched Omasiri closely. Such love, she murmured, and there was a hint of something like admiration in her tone. I have seen bargains made for gold, for power, for selfish desires, but a bargain made for love, that is rarer. She nodded. Very well, if you are certain, we shall seal this pact. Omasiri drew a deep, shaky breath. Fear roiled inside her, but she steadied herself. She reached out and took the old woman's hand in both of hers. The hand was bony and cold, but Omasiri held it firmly. I am certain. I offer you my soul for my mother's life. Please save her. The old woman's eyes flashed with an emotion Omasiri couldn't read, perhaps triumph or hunger. She tightened the grip on Omasiri's hands. You must say it clearly, child. Swear it. Omasiri nodded, her voice steady as she spoke the fateful words. I, Omasiri, give my soul for my mother Akudo's life. This I swear. As soon as those words left her mouth, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, rattling the tree branches overhead. The oil lamp in Omasiri's hand blew out, plunging them into near darkness, save for the moonlight. The old woman released Omasiri's hands and raised her own arms high. Though Omasiri could barely see her now, she sensed her presence growing taller and more imposing, as if the shadows themselves made her a cloak. In a language Omasiri did not understand, the old woman began to chant. The words were ancient and harsh-sounding, echoing off the trees. The earth trembled beneath Omasiri's feet, a low rumble as if something deep underground had awakened. Fear seized Omasiri's heart. She shut her eyes tightly, feeling tears fly from the corners of her eyes as the wind now howled around them. It was as if a storm had erupted in that tiny clearing alone. Leaves swirled, dust kicked up, stinging Omasiri's skin. She swayed, feeling dizzy. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through Omasiri's chest. She cried out, doubling over. It felt like an invisible hand had reached inside her and gripped her heart and mind together, pulling at something vital. She gasped for air as the pain pulsed, then just as quickly, it dulled to a strange numbness. The wind stopped. The forest fell silent again. Omasiri opened her eyes slowly, panting. The old woman stood before her, arms lowered now. The chant had ceased. "It is done," the old woman said quietly. Her voice seemed to echo, as if two people had spoken in unison for just an instant. Omasiri straightened with effort. Her body felt odd, heavy and light at the same time, but the pain was gone. "Did it work?" she asked anxiously. "My mother, will she be okay now?" The old woman smiled and nodded. "Go home, child. By the time the cock crows at dawn, your mother, Akudo, will be healed completely. She will awaken with the strength of a young woman, and the sickness will be gone from her blood." Omasiri almost sobbed with relief at those words. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." She impulsively stepped forward to hug the old woman, but the woman took a quick step back, raising one finger sternly. "Remember our pact," the old woman warned, her tone cold. "Life is not given freely, child. I will come for what is mine. Each year on this night, you will feel me taking a piece of your soul. It is too late to change your mind now." Omasiri swallowed and bowed her head. "I understand," she said quietly. The reality of what she'd agreed to was sinking in, but she forced herself not to think about it. Her mother's life in exchange for her soul. It was done, and she would pay the price. The old woman's eerie eyes softened slightly as she gazed at the girl. She reached out one more time, taking Omasiri's hand and turning it palm up. With a sharp fingernail, the old woman drew a quick cut across Omasiri's palm. Omasiri winced but did not pull away as a line of blood appeared. The old woman then drew a cut on her own palm as well. But strangely, no blood dripped from the old woman's wound, as if her blood had long dried up. She pressed her cold palm to Omasiri's bleeding one and clasped their hands together, mixing their blood. "Our bond is sealed in blood. Your soul shall be the soil from which your mother's life blooms anew." She let go of Omasiri's hand. The cut on Omasiri's palm had stopped bleeding already. The old woman stepped back, and her form seemed to grow dimmer, blending with the shadows. "Go home," her voice now sounding distant and echoing through the trees, "and tell no one of this, or the bargain will be forfeit." Before Omasiri could respond, a sudden cloud drifted across the face of the moon, shrouding the clearing in darkness. When the moonlight returned moments later, the old woman was gone. The clearing was empty, as if Omasiri had been standing there all alone. Omasiri realized she was shaking from head to toe. She had just bargained with something not of this world. Part of her wanted to collapse and cry in fear and shock, but she thought of her mother lying at home at death's door, and she steadied herself. Finding her oil lamp on the ground, Omasiri fumbled with trembling hands to relight it using a flint stone she carried. It took a few tries, but soon a small flame flickered back to life, casting comforting light again. Omasiri looked around the silent trees. There was no sign of the old woman, not even footprints on the soft earth. Only the disturbed leaves and grass bore witness that something uncanny had happened here. Clutching the lamp, Omasiri turned and hurried back the way she came. She half ran, half stumbled through the forest path. Branches seemed to reach for her in the dark, and distant animal cries pierced the night. Fear nipped at her heels, and she imagined glowing eyes watching from the bushes. She couldn't get out of the forest fast enough. When Omasiri finally broke through the tree line and saw the faint glow of her village's huts ahead, she almost collapsed with relief. Dawn was just beginning to creep into the sky, a faint grey light washing away the darkest hours of night. Omasiri slowed to catch her breath as she crossed the clearing to her home. Her heart was pounding not just from the run, but from anticipation. Would her mother truly be healed? It felt impossible, like a dream. But then, had she really met a forest witch just now? Her bleeding palm and the lingering tingle in her chest told her it was all real. She reached the doorway of her hut, nearly afraid to go inside. What if something had gone wrong? Gathering her courage, she pushed aside the cloth that covered the doorway and entered. Inside, the first weak light of dawn peered through the small window. Omasiri saw her mother still lying on the mat where she'd left her. The oil lamp had long burnt out, for she could make out Akudo's form in the semi-darkness. "Ma," she whispered, kneeling beside her mother. Her voice shook. "Mother, are you awake?" For a terrible moment, there was silence. Akudo did not move. Panic seized Omasiri. Had she been too late? Did the magic not work? Then Akudo inhaled deeply, a steady, clear breath, not the shallow rasp from before. Omasiri let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Slowly, Akudo's eyes opened, and in the growing light, Omasiri could see they were clear and focused, not glazed with fever. Akudo blinked and turned her head to look at her daughter. "Omasiri," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Why are you kneeling on the floor, child? And why do I feel like I've had a long, good sleep?" Omasiri gave a choked laugh of pure relief. Tears of joy sprang to her eyes. "Mother," she cried softly, throwing her arms around Akudo. Akudo, confused but smiling, sat up slowly, returning the embrace. To her surprise, she felt no pain, no dizziness, only a light, healthy feeling in her limbs. "Omasiri," she marveled as Omasiri pulled back to look at her face. Akudo placed her hand on her own chest. The tightness in her lungs was gone. Her fever had broken. "What happened?" she asked in wonder. "The last thing I remember, I was so weak, and now I feel as if I've been healed."
Omasiri wiped her tears, a radiant smile on her face. She could hardly contain her happiness. Her mother was alive. She was going to live. "It's a miracle, Ma. The gods heard my prayers," Omasiri said, her voice overflowing with gratitude and love. "You are healed now. You're going to be okay." Akudo looked at her daughter's face, glowing in the dawnlight, and felt tears in her own eyes. She had resigned herself to death, but now she felt full of life. She pulled Omasiri into another hug. "My child, you stayed by my side through it all. The gods must have indeed heard your cries. I am so grateful to be here with you." Omasiri closed her eyes, holding her mother tight, committing this moment to memory. Her mother's warm arms around her, alive and well. She pushed aside any lingering fears about the bargain she had made. That was a worry for another day. Right now, in this moment, her world was right again. Her mother lived, and that was everything. Morning sunlight filtered into the hut, golden and warm. For the first time in months, Akudo stepped out of her home on her own 2 feet, feeling strong and steady. Omasiri stayed close by her side, half in disbelief at her mother's renewed energy. It truly was as the old woman promised. Akudo was completely healed. As they emerged into the daylight, a few neighbors passing by nearly dropped the baskets they carried. One of them, Nneka, blinked as if seeing a ghost. "Akudo, you are up," she exclaimed, rushing over. "And you look well." Her tone was astonished. Akudo gave a bright smile. "Yes, Nneka, I feel wonderful. Better than I have in a long time," she said. Her voice was clear and strong, a far cry from the weak whispers of the day before. Nneka placed a hand on Akudo's forehead out of habit, checking for fever, then quickly withdrew it, embarrassed. "No fever, and your eyes are clear. Oh, praise the gods," she cried. By now, 2 other neighbors had noticed and gathered around excitedly. A chorus of amazed voices rose. "We thought you could not even stand. It is a miracle. The ancestors have done it. Akudo is healed." Omasiri found herself smiling so widely her cheeks hurt. She stayed just behind her mother, watching as people embraced Akudo or patted her back in joy. Before long, nearly the whole village knew that Akudo, who had been on the brink of death, was walking around healthy and laughing. Healer Uzo came as well when the news reached him. The old healer approached Akudo, eyes wide with amazement. He said, "This is unexpected." He looked her up and down as she stood outside her hut, greeting well-wishers. Akudo grasped the healer's hands. "Uzo, your medicine finally worked. I woke up feeling completely fine," she said gratefully, assuming perhaps his treatment took effect. Healer Uzo shook his head, still baffled. He knew the herbs he gave were only to ease pain, not a cure. "It is beyond medicine," he said softly, so only Akudo and Omasiri could hear. His gaze flickered to Omasiri for a moment, and she looked away nervously, hoping he could not see her secret. Soon, a spontaneous celebration began. It was as if Akudo had returned from the land of spirits, and such an event called for rejoicing. Neighbors brought food to Akudo's compound, a bowl of pounded yam from one, palm nut soup from another, even some smoked fish, which was a luxury.
Someone tapped palm wine from a tree and shared it in hollow gourds. Despite their poverty, a small goat was found and slaughtered by a couple of enthusiastic men who declared that a feast was needed. Akudo protested at first, not wanting anyone to make a fuss or spend on her behalf, but her friends shushed her. "We almost lost you, Nogozi," wiping tears of happiness from her eyes. "Let us celebrate this gift of life." Under the shade of a big fruit tree in the compound, the villagers gathered. Laughter and chatter filled the air. Akudo sat on a stool in the center with Omasiri by her side like a protective guardian. Akudo's face glowed with happiness, color back in her cheeks, and she looked years younger than she had the day before. As they shared food and drink, people asked questions and marveled. "Akudo, how did this happen? Was it a special herb? Did you see something in a dream?" an elder inquired. Akudo shook her head in wonder. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I just remember falling asleep feeling very sick, and then I woke up at dawn feeling perfectly fine. It must be the grace of the gods. My daughter prayed so hard for me. Perhaps the gods heard her." Omasiri kept mostly quiet, smiling politely when spoken to. Inside, she felt a mix of joy and cautiousness. She was overjoyed to see her mother like this, surrounded by friends and well-wishers. But she also remembered the old woman's warning. Tell no one of this or the bargain will be forfeit. She dared not say anything that might hint at what she had done. When others praised her for being a devoted daughter, Omasiri just shook her head humbly. "I did only what any child should do," she said softly. "It was the gods who healed my mother." As the day went on, music started. A couple of young men drummed on hollow logs and upturned gourds, creating a lively beat. Some children clapped and danced. Akudo even stood up and joined a short dance, swaying to the rhythm, to everyone's delight. Seeing her dance after being bedridden for so long made Omasiri laugh out loud in pure delight. It was the happiest day Omasiri could remember. Her mother was alive and healthy. That was all that mattered. For a while, Omasiri allowed herself to forget about the dark forest and the bargain. It almost felt like a bad dream compared to the bright reality of the celebration. However, as evening approached and people began to depart, tired but cheerful, a subtle unease crept back into Omasiri's heart. After all the excitement, Akudo insisted on Osingo tidy up the compound. They collected discarded leaves and banana peels from the feast, and Akudo carried the cooking pots back inside. Omasiri tried to protest, telling her mother to rest, but Akudo laughed. "I have been resting for too many months, my dear. Let me enjoy doing things again. I feel strong as a young woman," she said, stretching her arms playfully. Omasiri couldn't help but smile. It was true. Akudo moved with vigor and energy, not a hint of illness remaining. They finished cleaning as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Mother and daughter sat together outside their hut, watching the dusk settle. The village had grown quiet after the day's excitement. A few distant voices could be heard, mothers calling their children home, goats bleating in their pens. The air was cool and calm. Akudo placed an arm around Omasiri's shoulders and squeezed gently. "I haven't had the chance to really speak to you alone all day," she said softly. "Thank you, my daughter." Omasiri looked at her mother puzzled. "For what, ma?"
"For everything," Akudo replied, smiling lovingly. "For caring for me when I was ill, for never giving up hope. They all said you hardly slept or ate these past weeks because you were tending to me. You prayed for me day and night, I hear." Omasiri felt a lump in her throat. She lowered her eyes to hide the guilt that threatened to show. If only her mother knew the true extent of what she had done. Would she still thank her, or would she be horrified? The thought was too painful to consider. "I would do anything for you, mother," Omasiri said quietly, which was the truest thing she could say. Akudo, thinking her daughter was simply being humble, kissed the top of Omasiri's head. "Your love gave me strength to fight. I am blessed to have such a daughter." They stayed like that for a while, shoulder to shoulder, listening to crickets chirping. The moon rose behind the tree line, silver and serene. Akudo began to hum a gentle tune, a lullaby she used to sing to Omasiri when she was a child. Omasiri leaned her head on Akudo's shoulder, letting the soft melody wash over her. It was a moment of pure peace and contentment. Over the next days and weeks, life truly returned to normal. Akudo resumed her daily routines as if she had never been sick at all. She went to the stream with other women to fetch water, laughing and chatting. She weeded their small vegetable garden without getting winded. She even helped on market days to carry produce to the village square to sell. People did not stop marveling at Akudo's recovery. But as time passed, they accepted it as a blessing and moved on to their own daily concerns. In a village, there is always much work to do and new happenings. A baby born here, a stray goat lost there, planting and harvest, minor squabbles and celebrations. So, while some still called Akudo the woman who came back from death's door, they also treated her normally again, inviting her to help or participate in communal activities. And they treated Omasiri with a bit more respect and kindness, seeing how devoted she had been. Mothers would say to their children, "Learn from Omasiri, she loves and honors her mother." Omasiri and Akudo's bond grew even closer, if that was possible. Nearly losing one another made them cherish each day even more. On clear evenings, they would sit outside and admire the stars. On busy mornings, they walked side by side, talking and laughing. Akudo sometimes paused to just study her daughter's face and would say, "I'm so lucky to have you." And Omasiri would smile, though inside her heart clenched with a secret sadness. Omasiri tried hard to forget the night in the forest, but she could not entirely. Sometimes she would wake in a sweat, remembering that moment of pain in her chest when the old woman took hold of her soul. But every time she reminded herself why she did it. Akudo's laughter the next day was all the proof she needed that it was worth it. Months rolled by, and soon a full year had nearly passed since that fateful night. Akudo remained in perfect health through all the seasons. Truly a miracle, as she did not even catch a simple cold. Omasiri often silently thanked whatever powers had granted this boon, even as she mentally steeled herself for the eventual price. She was not sure what to expect when the anniversary of the pact approached. The old woman had said each year on that night she would take a piece of Omasiri's soul. Would the old woman appear again physically, or would it just happen unseen? As the day grew close, Omasiri found herself growing anxious. She tried to hide it from her mother, but Akudo sensed something. "You've been quiet the last few days," Akudo remarked one afternoon as they peeled cassava together. "Are you feeling unwell, Omasiri?" Omasiri forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit tired," she lied. Inside, her stomach was in knots. She could hardly eat as the sun began to set on the day that marked 1 year since the bargain. She felt fear of the unknown. Maybe nothing would happen at all. That evening, Akudo was happily oblivious to any significance of the date. She cheerfully cooked a yam porridge for dinner and even added some wild greens and a bit of smoked fish to make it tastier. A celebratory meal simply because she was in good spirits. Omasiri picked at her portion, managing only a few spoonfuls. After dinner, as night settled, a heavy silence filled Omasiri's mind. She sat outside while Akudo tidied up inside the hut. The moon was just a thin crescent this night, providing little light. Omasiri's heart thudded loudly in her ears. And then, as she feared, it began. It started with a faint whisper on the breeze, a voice just at the edge of hearing. Omasiri stiffened, recognizing it at once. It was the old woman's voice, though distant and indistinct. She couldn't make out the words, but she felt the intent. It was as if invisible eyes were on her, and an invisible hand reached towards her chest. Omasiri's breath caught. A wave of cold dread washed through her body, followed by a sudden fog in her mind. Akudo stepped out of the hut at that moment, carrying a mat to sit on. "The night is so warm, let's sit outside for a bit," she was saying. But then she saw Omasiri's expression in the dark and rushed to her. "Omasiri, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Omasiri opened her mouth to answer, but she wasn't sure what was happening. She felt a sharp pang inside her head, and abruptly a memory slipped away. So quickly she didn't even know exactly which memory it was. She just knew something was gone.
She suddenly felt disoriented, like she lost track of what she was doing. I don't know, Omasiri stammered. She pressed a hand to her temple. I feel strange, ma, just a bit lightheaded. Akudo guided Omasiri to sit on the mat. Maybe the heat of the day got to you, she said, worry creasing her brow. I'll get you some water.
As Akudo hurried to fetch a calabash of water, Omasiri sat trembling. The presence, whatever it was, seemed to recede after those few moments. The night felt normal again. Crickets chirped, the breeze was gentle. But Omasiri knew the old woman had taken her first payment. Akudo returned and Omasiri drank the water slowly, trying to calm herself. Her mother watched her with concern. Do you feel ill? Are you in pain? No, I think it's passing, Omasiri replied quietly. Indeed, physically, she now felt fine, apart from a slight chill and a lingering anxiety. But something inside her was disturbed. She tried to recall the day's tasks. She remembered going to the market in the morning, trading cassava for beans, coming home, peeling cassava, cooking. There was something else she had done in the afternoon, wasn't there? For some reason, she couldn't recall an hour's worth of work she did before sunset. She frowned, trying to focus. What is it? Akudo asked gently. I forgot whether I collected the firewood from the back of the hut or not today, Omasiri said slowly. It seemed trivial, but she truly couldn't remember doing it, even though gathering firewood was part of her daily routine before evening. Akudo gave a small smile of relief. Oh, is that all? I saw you bring the firewood bundle in, dear. It's by the kitchen wall where you always put it, she said, pointing. Omasiri looked to where her mother gestured and saw the pile of wood. She had absolutely no recollection of picking those sticks up and carrying them there. It was only a small gap in her memory, but it frightened her deeply. I must be tired indeed, she murmured, forcing a little laugh to hide her alarm. I'm sorry for worrying you over something so silly. Akudo, believing it was nothing serious, rubbed Omasiri's back. You have been working so hard. Perhaps tonight you'll go to bed early and get a good night's sleep. I don't want you falling ill on me now, alright? She teased lightly, though her eyes were still a bit worried. Omasiri nodded and managed a smile. Inside, she promised herself not to let her mother suspect anything. This was her burden to carry. That night, after lying down, Omasiri stared at the thatched roof above her for a long time. She felt essentially normal aside from that missing sliver of memory and a lingering sorrowful feeling she couldn't place. The first payment had been taken. It was subtle. If she hadn't been expecting something, she might have dismissed it entirely as tiredness or stress, but she knew better. Quiet tears slid down the sides of her face into her pillow as she accepted this new reality. Each year it would be like this, or worse, but she would endure it. Her mother's warm breaths in sleep, audible on the other side of the hut, were worth a price. Omasiri closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness, though the old woman was not there to hear. Thank you for keeping your promise. It was both a gratitude and an acknowledgement that she remembered her own promise. In the dim light of the crescent moon, the village of Unubi slept peacefully. Akudo's life went on bright and strong, and in exchange, the slow fading of Omasiri's spirit had begun. The seasons turned and another year passed in the kingdom of Unubi. Akudo and Omasiri continued to live in peace and relative happiness. Akudo remained hearty and strong, walking and laughing as if she had never been ill. Omasiri was content seeing her mother thrive, but in the back of her mind, she never forgot the secret price of that health. As the second anniversary of the fateful bargain approached, Omasiri began to grow uneasy again. The first year's payment had been subtle, a small lapse in memory that she could hide. She hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the worst was over.
Maybe the old woman's hold over her would remain weak. Still, when the time came near, Omasiri found herself watchful for any sign of the strange symptoms. She tried to act normal, going about her chores and daily life, but an inner tension gripped her. On the morning of the second anniversary, Omasiri woke with a strange sense of dread. It was the same date in the planting season when 2 years ago she had made the pact. The air felt heavy to her, though it was just another sunny day in reality. She helped her mother grind maize and swept the compound, forcing herself to chat and smile as usual. Akudo did not seem to sense anything amiss. She was cheerfully talking about going to visit a cousin in the next village later in the week. By midday, Omasiri started feeling a slight headache and a wave of fatigue. She excused herself to sit in the shade, blaming the hot sun. Akudo forced that she should drink water and rest a bit, thinking Omasiri was simply overworked. Omasiri closed her eyes under the mango tree in their yard, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She listened to the distant sounds of the village, a woman calling out that her soup was ready, children laughing as they chased each other, the rhythmic thud of a mortar and pestle from a neighbor's kitchen. These were comforting ordinary noises. They grounded her. As the afternoon wore on without incident, Omasiri began to hope that perhaps nothing would happen this time. Maybe last year had been an anomaly. She helped her mother sort beans and even found herself singing along with Akudo to a walk song, feeling lighter. But as sunset neared, the change came. They were inside the hut at twilight, peeling cocoyams for the evening meal. The orange glow of dusk filtered through the doorway. Akudo was reminiscing about Omasiri's father, telling a story of how he used to sing beautifully during the New Yam festival. Akudo chuckled. He had a voice so rich, people said he could charm birds out of trees with his songs. You loved to hear him sing when you were little. Normally, Omasiri would smile at such memories. She cherished the stories of her father, who had died when she was just 8 years old. But this time, as she tried to picture his face and recall his voice, she felt a blankness. It was as if her father's image was a painting that someone had smeared and faded in her mind. "Mama," Omasiri interrupted softly, frowning in concentration. "What did father look like again?" Akudo paused in her peeling and looked up in surprise. "What did he look like?" she repeated, thinking she misheard. Omasiri's heart beat faster. Why couldn't I remember clearly? She had always been able to recall her father, at least a general picture. His kind eyes, the shape of his nose similar to hers, the gap-toothed grin he shared with Akudo. But now it was slipping away, like a dream upon waking. I can't seem to remember his face, she admitted, her voice trembling despite her attempts to sound casual. Akudo put down the cocoyam and stared at her daughter. "Omasiri, you were 12 when your father passed. You haven't forgotten him, have you?"
I don't know. I remember things about him, like the wooden flute he used to play for me at night and how he carried me on his shoulders. But his face, it's blurry in my mind, Omasiri said, her eyes brimming with frustrated tears. Akudo's expression changed from confusion to gentle concern. She moved closer and put an arm around Omasiri. "It's all right, my dear. Sometimes memories fade a little with time," she said soothingly. "Here, let me help you remember." Akudo proceeded to describe Omasiri's father in detail. The scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident, the dimple on his right cheek when he smiled, the way his eyes crinkled warmly. As her mother spoke, Omasiri tried desperately to grasp each detail and reconstruct the image in her mind. She managed to piece together something of an image, enough to nod and smile weakly. Yes, I think I remember now," she lied, not wanting to worry her mother further. But, in truth, the picture in her mind still felt faint and unsteady. Akudo studied Omasiri's face, noticing her daughter's unease.
She gave Omasiri a squeeze. Memory is a strange thing. I have also forgotten some details about my own parents over the years, she said kindly, though it unsettled her that Omasiri would forget something so personal. Don't be too troubled. Your father loved you very much. That's something you won't forget, right? That, at least, Omasiri still remembered clearly, the feeling of being loved by him. She clung to that. Right, I won't forget that, mother, she said softly, leaning into Akudo's embrace. They resumed their tasks, but Akudo kept a discreet eye on her daughter. Omasiri seemed distracted the whole evening. She moved as if in a slight daze, nearly adding salt twice to the soup before Akudo gently stopped her. When they ate, Omasiri was quiet and picked at her food. Later that night, after they had gone to bed, Akudo lay awake longer than usual. Moonlight cast a pale rectangle on the floor through the window. She could hear Omasiri gentle breathing from the other side of the hut, but something about it worried her. Was it a little too fast, as if Omasiri was anxious even in sleep? Akudo's mind replayed the moment earlier when Omasiri said she couldn't remember her father's face. What a strange, sad thing. Omasiri had adored her father and talked about him often, even years after his death. How could such a core memory become blurry? Perhaps Omasiri was just tired or stressed. The girl had taken on so much responsibility during Akudo's illness. Maybe it had taken a toll on her own health or mind. Akudo resolved to make sure Omasiri had some rest and maybe a bit of good medicine or herbs to strengthen her. She decided she'd ask Hila Ozo for a tonic to help Omasiri relax, perhaps. Feeling a bit calmer with a plan in mind, Akudo drifted off to sleep. That night, Akudo dreamed. In her dream, she found herself standing at the edge of the village under a bright full moon. Before her stretched the entrance to the forest, the very path that led into the dark tangle of trees. The night was unnaturally quiet. Not a single cricket chirped, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Akudo felt her heart begin to pound with dread. She recognized this place, though she had rarely walked this forest path in waking life. Yet, in the dream, it was as if she was being called forward by an invisible force. Slowly, she took one step, then another, onto the narrow trail beneath the trees. Each footfall made no sound on the soft earth. Shadows deepened around her as the towering trees blocked the moonlight, but at a bend in the path ahead, she saw a glow, a faint orange light like that of a small fire or lamp. She moved toward the light, and as she rounded the bend, she saw an old woman crouching by a fire in a small clearing. Her back was to Akudo, but the sight of her made her blood turn to ice in her veins. The woman had long, tangled grey hair and was wrapped in a faded cloth. Even though Akudo had never met someone exactly like this, something in her soul whispered that this was a dangerous being. As if hearing that thought, the old woman turned her head slowly and looked directly at Akudo. Her eyes glowed a smoldering red-orange, like the embers of a dying fire. Her face was shadowed, but those eyes burned into Akudo's mind. Akudo opened her mouth to scream or speak, but no sound came out. She was frozen in place as the old woman rose to her feet in one fluid motion. Despite her bent posture, the crone somehow seemed tall and looming now. In a voice that was a harsh whisper, the old woman spoke a single sentence. Life is not taken for nothing. Akudo jolted awake, sweating, her heart thudding as if she had run for miles. She sat up on her mat, gasping for breath, the dream still vivid in her mind. It felt more real than a normal dream. It had the weight of a message or a warning. Akudo shimmied a quick prayer to any friendly spirit listening, then got up to check on Omasiri. In the lamplight, she saw her daughter's face, peaceful in sleep, but perhaps a bit pale. Akudo gently touched Omasiri's forehead. It was cool. Omasiri stirred slightly, but did not wake. Not wanting to disturb her daughter, Akudo returned to her mat and sat deep in thought. The old woman in the dream, who could she be? And those words, life is not taken for nothing. It was an ominous phrase. Did it have something to do with Omasiri? Akudo's mind raced. Could it be a warning about the miracle of her own survival? She had been granted life when she was at death's door, perhaps by the mercy of the gods, but the dream seemed to imply a price for life. Life is not taken for nothing. Was someone's life taken, or something given in exchange for hers? He lit a small oil lamp beside the bed to chase away the darkness. The hut's interior came into view. The familiar walls, the law table, Omasiri sleeping on the other side. Everything looked normal, yet Akudo could not shake the sense of dread the dream gave her. She lit a small oil lamp beside the bed to chase away the darkness. The hut's interior came into view. The familiar walls, the law table, Omasiri sleeping on the other side. Everything looked normal, yet Akudo could not shake the sense of dread the dream gave her. She murmured a quick prayer to any friendly spirit listening, then got up to check on Omasiri. In the lamplight, she saw her daughter's face, peaceful in sleep, but perhaps a bit pale. Akudo gently touched Omasiri's forehead. It was cool. Omasiri stirred slightly, but did not wake. Not wanting to disturb her daughter, Akudo returned to her mat and sat deep in thought. The old woman in the dream, who could she be? And those words, life is not taken for nothing. It was an ominous phrase. Did it have something to do with Omasiri? Akudo's mind raced. Could it be a warning about the miracle of her own survival? She had been granted life when she was at death's door, perhaps by the mercy of the gods. But the dream seemed to imply a price for life. Life is not taken for nothing. Was someone's life taken, or something given in exchange for hers? She tried to make sense of it. Her own life had not been taken, it had been spared. So whose life? The phrasing was strange too. Life is not taken for nothing, not given for nothing. It sounded like something was taken so her life could continue. A chill crawled over Akudo's skin as a thought surfaced. Could it be referring to Omasiri? The idea was too terrible. Had Omasiri given up something, part of her life, her essence, for Akudo's sake? Akudo remembered how Omasiri had been willing to do anything to help, but surely a mere girl could not have done more than pray and care for her. How could she have given part of her life? It seemed impossible, something out of a folk tale. She decided she would not jump to conclusions from a single dream. It could just be her own fears manifesting as a nightmare. The stress of seeing Omasiri forget things and her own lingering guilt for causing Omasiri worry might have conjured that unsettling vision. Still, the dream would not leave her mind. Akudo did not sleep the rest of that night. She kept the lamp burning low and quietly recited prayers, asking for guidance and protection for her daughter. The next day, Akudo gently questioned Omasiri about how she felt. Omasiri claimed she was alright, just a little tired, which was true enough. Her memory lapse about her father's face seemed to have improved. By afternoon, Omasiri told her mother she could remember father again, although, in truth, Omasiri was piecing him together from descriptions and older memories. Akudo watched her daughter closely in the following days. Omasiri had mostly returned to her normal routine, but at times she did seem more distant or distracted. Once, Akudo found her staring at the cooking fire with a troubled expression. When asked what was wrong, Omasiri just shook her head and smiled weakly, saying she was only thinking. Some nights, Akudo thought she heard Omasiri quietly crying, though when she checked, Omasiri would pretend to be asleep or insist she was fine. These things pricked at Akudo's heart. Something was indeed weighing on her daughter. As weeks went by, the intensity of the worry faded a little. Omasiri seemed physically well. She was not losing weight or showing signs of illness. If anything, she appeared healthy as any young woman should be. It was only these odd lapses and sadness that seemed to plague her occasionally. Eventually, Akudo confided in her close friend, Ngozi, about her concerns. She did not mention the dream, only that Omasiri sometimes forget things and seemed sad. Ngozi clucked her tongue thoughtfully. The poor girl has been through a lot. Almost losing you must have scarred her heart, she said. Perhaps it's grief or fear that comes out in this strange way. Some young people become forgetful or depressed after a trauma. I thought of that, Akudo replied, stirring a pot of soup as they talked. But I wonder if it could be something more spiritual. You know, sometimes an ill-willed spirit might cause a person to be forgetful or steal a person's senses for a time. Ngozi crossed herself, a gesture some had started adopting from the new religion that traders spoke of, though old beliefs still held strong. God forbid such a thing, Ngozi said. But if you suspect a spirit, maybe you should see the healer or the priest at the shrine and ask for divination or prayers of protection. Akudo nodded. I think I will, if it continues. I just want my daughter to be well and happy. I feel like something is gnawing at her spirit, and I can't see it. She spoke the last words quietly, fear creeping into her voice. Ngozi squeezed her friend's hand reassuringly. Omasiri is a strong girl. Whatever it is, we will figure it out. The gods saved you. Maybe they are testing her now. Keep praying and watching over her. So, Akudo did. She poured her love and attention into Omasiri, hoping it would be enough to keep any darkness at bay. And Omasiri, in turn, tried her best to act like nothing was wrong for her mother's sake. But both mother and daughter were starting to realize that the nightmare had not fully ended with Akudo's recovery. A new, more subtle nightmare was unfolding, one measured in fading memories and quiet tears. Neither dared speak of it openly yet, but in the silence of her heart, Akudo prepared herself. If things got worse, she would seek help beyond just herbs and kind words. She would find answers, even if it meant confronting forces beyond the ordinary. The shadow that had brushed their lives was still there, and Akudo could feel it inching closer with each passing year.
Another year slipped by, and with it came the 3rd anniversary of the secret pact. By now, both Omasiri and Akudo lived with an unspoken worry. They did not discuss the strange occurrences openly, but each was aware that something was not right. Omasiri, for her part, marked the date in her heart with dread. She could feel it approaching like a gathering storm on the horizon. The previous year, she had lost clear memory of her father for a time. What might she lose this year? Sometimes she thought about the old woman's words. Little by little, you will lose the parts of yourself that make you who you are. She prayed that the path taken would not hurt her mother or cause any public embarrassment. Above all, she hoped her mother would remain unaware of the cause. Akudo, on the other hand, had grown more convinced that Omasiri's troubles were not mere stress. She remembered her unsettling dream and continued to have it occasionally with slight variations. Some nights, she heard the old woman's whisper in her sleep. Life is not taken for nothing, repeated over and over like a dark chorus. Each time, Akudo would wake with her heart racing. She hadn't deciphered the full meaning, but it left her deeply uneasy, especially as she saw her daughter's behavior change each year around the same time. As the 3rd year's day neared, Akudo quietly prepared. She obtained a small charm from the village shrine, a woven bracelet said to ward off evil spirits, and gave it to Omasiri under the pretense that it was for general good luck and protection. Omasiri, guessing her mother's worry, accepted it and wore it dutifully, though she doubted it would stop what was coming. The day of the 3rd anniversary arrived with a heavy, humid heat. The sky was overcast, monsoon clouds gathering, as if reflecting the tension in Omasiri's soul. Akudo suggested that they take it easy that day. She told Omasiri to stay in the village and help with light chores, avoiding any long trips or strenuous work. In the afternoon, however, a neighbor came to ask if Omasiri could help fetch a large pot of water from the stream, since the neighbor's own daughter was unwell.
Kind-hearted as always, Omasiri agreed. Akudo was reluctant to let her go alone, but Omasiri assured her she'd be fine and it would only take a short while. The path to the stream was familiar. Omasiri had walked it nearly every day since she was a child. It wound gently through a patch of forest and down to a clear brook where the villagers collected water. She filled the large clay pot, placed it on her head with a wrapping cloth for padding, and began walking back as she had done countless times. But halfway home, as she balanced the heavy pot, Omasiri felt a sudden wave of disorientation. The forest path that was usually so well known seemed foreign. She stopped, slowly lowering the water pot to the ground before it could fall. She looked around, heart thudding. The trees swayed slightly in a breeze, the leaves whispering. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the narrow trail. Where am I? Omasiri whispered to herself, panic rising. For a moment, she didn't recognize the path or remember which way was home. It was as if a curtain had dropped over her mind, obscuring her sense of direction and purpose. She knew she had come to fetch water. She could see the filled pot. But which way had she come from? Was it left or right along this bend? And why did her surroundings look so unfamiliar, though she had trodden this path for years? She realized with a surge of fear that she couldn't even recall heading out from home. The entire task of coming to the stream was hazy. She vaguely remembered talking to a neighbor, but the details were slipping through her fingers. Omasiri's breathing quickened. She felt like a small child lost in the woods. The old woman's presence was palpable. Though she didn't see or hear her, she could sense something was wrong inside her head. Clutching the good luck bracelet on her wrist, Omasiri tried to calm herself. Think, Omasiri. You know this place, she murmured. She closed her eyes and tried to picture the map of the path in her mind. Nothing came. She could recall nothing beyond the moment she stood in now. Tears pricked her eyes. Just then, she heard footsteps and the sound of someone humming a tune. It was a familiar tune, one of the village women's songs. Around the bend came an older woman named Mama Chika, carrying a bundle of firewood on her head. Mama Chika stopped when she saw Omasiri standing there with the water pot at her feet and a lost look on her face. Omasiri, my dear, are you all right? She asked kindly as she approached. Omasiri tried to compose herself. She forced a smile. Yes, Auntie, I'm just taking a short rest. The pot is heavy, she fibbed, wiping at her eyes to hide her tears. Mama Chika frowned slightly. Even in the dim light, she could see that something was off. Omasiri was a strong young woman, not known to tire easily. And why were her eyes wet? Let me help you then, Mama Chika offered. She set down her bundle of wood and hoisted the water pot up, balancing it expertly on her own hand with one hand. Come, you walk beside me. We're almost back to the village. Omasiri nodded, feeling relief at not being alone, but also embarrassment that she needed help. As they walked, Mama Chika chatted lightly about ordinary things, how a goat had eaten her yam seedlings, how the weather might bring rain tonight. Omasiri responded with polite hums and nods, her mind still foggy and anxious. Within a few minutes, the trees thinned and they emerged near the edge of the village. The sight of the familiar huts and gardens made Omasiri sigh of relief. Now she knew exactly where she was. Her home was just a short walk ahead, and she could even see her mother outside in the yard, looking down the road with a hand shading her eyes. Akudo had been waiting anxiously, and when she spotted Omasiri and Mama Chika, she hurried over. Thank you, Chika, she said, taking the pot from the older woman's head despite protestations. Akudo was strong enough now to carry it the remaining distance. No trouble at all, Mama Chika said, eyeing Omasiri subtly. I found the poor girl looking a bit tired on the way, so I thought an extra hand wouldn't hurt. Akudo placed the water pot down by their hut and turned to her daughter. Omasiri offered a weak smile, avoiding her mother's probing gaze. I'm all right, Mama. I just felt a little dizzy for a moment in the forest. Mama Chika was kind enough to help. Mama Chika patted Omasiri's shoulder gently. We must take care of our young ones. Perhaps she skipped lunch or hasn't had enough water herself. You should rest, my dear. After thanking Mama Chika again, Akudo led Omasiri into their hut. The moment they were alone, Akudo faced her daughter, worry etched on her face. Tell me truly, what happened out there? Omasiri sank down onto a stool, rubbing her temples. The fog in her mind had mostly lifted, but a dull ache remained. I don't know, Mama, she confessed. One moment I was walking back from the stream, and the next moment I felt completely lost. I couldn't remember which way to go or what I was doing for a short while. Akudo's face fell, and her hands trembled slightly as she knelt in front of Omasiri. My child, this is more than just being tired, isn't it? She gently touched the woven bracelet on Omasiri's wrist. Did this charm not protect you? Omasiri shook her head slowly, tears escaping her eyes despite her resolve to stay calm. I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't want to scare you. I thought maybe this year nothing would happen, but it did, and it was worse than before. Akudo gathered Omasiri into her arms. Both of them were quiet for a while, Akudo rocking gently as she held her daughter, much as she had when Omasiri was small. Omasiri's tears soaked into her mother's shoulder. After a moment, Akudo spoke softly but firmly. I have to know what is causing this. This is the 3rd year now that you have suffered like this on this particular day. It cannot be a coincidence. Omasiri stiffened slightly. She pulled back to look at her mother's face. Should she tell her? The urge to finally spill the secret welled up, nearly overwhelming. How she longed to share this burden with someone, especially her mother. But at that thought, fear clamped down on her heart. The old woman's warning echoed in her mind. Telling anyone could forfeit the bargain. What if by telling, she caused her mother's illness to return or something worse? I don't know why, Mama, she lied haltingly, wiping her face. Maybe I was cursed by someone, or some wandering spirit is harming me for no reason. Akudo's eyes searched Omasiri's as if trying to find the truth behind them. She gently touched Omasiri's cheek. My heart tells me you might know more than you say, she whispered, but I won't force you. Perhaps it could be some kind of curse or spirit's work. Either way, we must find out and put a stop to it. Omasiri looked down, guilt twisting in her chest. What can we do? She asked in a small voice. Akudo took a deep breath, as if steadying herself. I have to seek answers from those who have knowledge of such things. We will go to Hilauzo tomorrow, and if he cannot help, perhaps the chief priest at the shrine might know something. There has to be a solution. Omasiri nodded weakly. Part of her was relieved. Her mother's involvement meant she didn't have to face this alone. But another part was terrified. What if the healer or priest discerned the truth? Would that count as telling someone? And what then? That evening, Akudo prepared a calming herbal drink for Omasiri and insisted she rest. Omasiri lay on her mat, sipping the warm, bitter brew that her mother had sweetened with a bit of honey. It made her a bit drowsy, and she was grateful. Akudo sat beside her as she drank, humming a soothing song and stroking Omasiri's hair. Sleep, my child, she whispered. We'll find a way through this. With her mother's gentle hand on her head and the effect of the herbs, Omasiri felt herself drifting off despite the turmoil of the day. Her last waking thought was that no matter what happened, she was lucky to have such a loving mother by her side. Akudo stayed by Omasiri until she was sure the girl was asleep. Then she quietly left the hut and stepped outside. The overcast sky finally released its burden as a light rain began to fall, pattering on the roofs and soil. Akudo tilted her face up to the cool rain, letting it mingle with the tears that she had been holding back. In her heart, Akudo was now certain that Omasiri's condition was connected to her own miraculous recovery. The words from her dream haunted her. Life is not taken for nothing. Someone, something, had spared Akudo's life and now was claiming pieces of Omasiri in return. Her hands clenched into fists as she stood in the rain. If that was true, then Akudo had been living on a debt she never knew existed, a debt paid by her daughter's very soul. The guilt and anger at that thought was almost too much to bear. Akudo trembled, not from the chill of the rain, but from the fierce determination growing inside her. She needed to confirm the truth, whatever it was, and then she would do everything in her power to save Omasiri. Tomorrow, she would visit Hila Uzo and demand answers. She would resolve not to brush aside any strange possibility, no matter how dark or supernatural. Her daughter's life, her very essence, was at stake. As thunder rumbled softly in the distance and the rain continued to fall, Akudo whispered a prayer into the night, not just to the familiar gods of hearth and harvest, but to any benevolent force listening. Help me save my child. Show me what to do. With that, she returned inside, sitting vigil near Omasiri for the rest of the night, her mind already planning the quest for answers that would begin at first light.